there comes with difficulties in life, a situation or a moment when you have to either accept it for what it is and focus on the positives in the situation, or you carry on thinking, woe is me, and inevitably that's not a recipe for happiness.
Welcome to another episode of This Catholic Life. Conversations about life's ups and downs, big and small, how we deal with every situation imaginable, whatever life throws at us, but still manage to be sensible, practical and joyful. Today's show is titled Parenting Hard Mode. Parenting is hard enough as it is, but what about those times when life throws you a massive curveball, or a number of massive curveballs? I'm your host, Peter Holmes, and today I'm joined by Gabe and Jovina James. Jovina and Gabe have been medical doctors now for about 10 years, married for nearly 7 years, and parents for what they describe as 1 million sleepless nights, which is pretty universal amongst parenting. They live and work in Queensland, and which is why they're claiming to be the only people wearing t-shirts in this podcast. It's not true. I'm wearing a t-shirt. The fact that I have a jumper over it as well is notwithstanding.
Not quite a t-shirt right today, but
yeah,
there you
it's
go.
A little bit chilly for Queensland today. Yeah.
And what does chilly mean in Queensland?
Top of 24. It's ghastly. Yeah.
Just ghastly. Yeah, right. Yeah, I was complaining to a Melbourneite recently that we got down below 10, and they were just mocking me because they had an overnight low of 2, I think, or something like that in Melbourne. Tragic for them.
You're not a Victorian anymore, are you?
I haven't been a Victorian for over 20 years now, so I go back and I usually take one jumper and I forget completely how bad it is down there. Before we get started, that's just a reminder that if you like the show, you should subscribe on your podcast app, and that way you won't miss an episode. We should open up by saying that Jovina and Gabe have 4 children, Max, Zelly, Louis, all with them on earth, and Teddy, who is in heaven, which gives us an indication that not everything has gone as smoothly as one would hope. Perhaps if you just give us a brief introduction to your general circumstances there.
Sure. So we have Max, who's nearly 6, actually. Started school this year, unbelievably. Wow. We, 18 months up, when Max was 18 months old, we had a little boy called Theodore, or Teddy. And when he was 8 months old, he went to heaven in his sleep. So he has been our advocate in heaven since then. He's on the other side of the veil. We have Zelly, who's nearly 3 and is a little ray of sunshine. And we now have Louis, who's 13 months old and has just found his voice.
Oh.
Likes to yell.
Right.
Which is wonderful, I'm actually delighted because he really wasn't using his voice until recently. So it's a great developmental stage.
Right. And not only have you had the experience of Teddy going to heaven, but there's been some challenges with the others, or one or two of the others.
Yeah, so we have 2 of our kids have a muscle disorder, which I guess in simple terms mean they have a lot of difficulty with their day-to-day movement. And in the case of Louis, he's also had some other kind of related issues. So he's recently had some surgery for a palate repair, and also to kind of try and fix his ears, which were not working. So those things they've been additional little challenges along the way, and will continue to be down the track for us.
It's worth saying from the outset, before we get into this kind of hard mode idea, that all parenting is hard. All parenting takes near constant attention, hard work, self-sacrificing love. There are financial constraints, but those financial constraints are not the biggest deal. Parenting is hard enough whenever all the circumstances are perfect, when you have perfect parents and perfect in-laws and perfect financial security, and you've got a happy and stable marriage. So we're not talking about hard mode parenting as if every other parenting is easy. We're just simply saying that there are some circumstances which really push, and I'm certainly nowhere near the circumstances of the Jameses, but our own young fellow, Albert, had months and months in ICU and has had open heart surgery and throat surgery and stomach surgery, and thankfully now has come through in flying colours and is as healthy as a young boy with Down syndrome can hope to be. He's also very, very loud. And we keep reminding ourselves that that's a blessing every time he yells. Like, it's a blessing that he can talk. And it's a blessing that he demands a book every single minute of the day, or a swing or whatever else is taking his fancy. But it has to be said that the constancy of these situations is trying. In some respects, the big moments, people rallied around us in the big moments. People rallied around us, and we felt, the surge of spiritual support, and we could reach for extraordinary grace at that time. But I guess I'll put it to you: have you found the big moments or the ongoing grind to be harder in some respects?
I certainly think the latter, and this is not to denigrate any of our family or friends who've been amazing throughout our journey as parents, but certainly there are days on end where no one actually does check in on you, and that's fine. They've got their lives to live, but you do feel, particularly in these times, like perhaps you are in this all alone, and perhaps nobody really does care. And that, I think in my true self, I know that that's not true. But you're right. There are those big moments where you just feel that wave of grace pulling you through, and then there's what I call the quicksand, where you kind of just struggling to stay on top of it all. Yeah.
And in some respects, it's irrational, because I'm sitting here going, oh, nobody else wants to help me. But realistically, they can't come into my house and do the things that I need to do. They can't really be there all that time. But it's just the feeling of being like, and some of it though seems to be about people not being able to have the same perspective because they simply don't understand what's going on. Would you say that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I think there's a few things I'd like to say about that, but the reality is, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, is as true as ever. And obviously many of us don't have that village structure around us. I mean, certainly we're 1,000 kilometers from any other family member, and as amazing as they are, I think even if we were nearby, it would still be difficult for them to provide us with a lot of assistance. And we at times have been forced to reach out because there's no other way to cope. Jove is much better at it than I am, thank God, because I'd probably, if I was doing this on my own, certainly would be feeling very, very isolated and probably wouldn't be brave enough to knock on a neighbour's door. I remember my mum growing up, I was one of 10. One of her great qualities is she had no shame in asking for help. I think it was just a survival instinct she developed. And she would happily, if she was driving along with a car full of kids and needed something, she would literally pull over and knock on someone's front door and ask them, which is
that's
almost
extraordinary.
unheard of.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, this day and age, there's almost a kind of we keep telling ourselves that we're better at asking for help and acknowledging vulnerability, but we're actually more and more isolated, and we tend to want to do things by ourselves a lot more. I wonder, I mean, there was a moment for me where my pride sort of had to take a dive. I remember coming home. This was one moment we came home and we realized we'd been keeping track of everybody who helped us to this point. And we'd been, keeping a tally of who had given us meals and everything. So we had this illusion we were going to thank them all at the end of it. And we came home to find 7 lasagnas packed up at our front door. And we had no idea who they were from. And Susie broke down and cried. And I was very teary as well, thinking there's just no way we can pay back everybody who's helped us. And we just had to sit and take it. We just had to take the help. And it was a moment of just finally giving in, and I realized that it was actually my pride stopping me from wanting that sort of help, that even asking for it. And in a sense, God had to break that down in me before I could receive the help that other people were asking to give.
Yeah. And getting back to the other point you made, Peter, about people perhaps not understanding, is I've often reflected on my, I guess, growth personally in this regard, and certainly when I was single, I look back on those times when my older brother had young children or friends around me, and I didn't even think to offer help a lot of the time. I had no understanding of where they were at, and probably the same could be said of when we had one child. I think we still, although there were definitely challenges, it goes up somewhat, not massively, I think, with additional kids. And
I like your point about your pride having to take a real tumble, Peter, because I feel like that is not once and for all kind of event for me. No. I think that's an ongoing with every new struggle. It's like, yes, thank you. I will have your help, please.
That's right.
Even more.
Yes, my wife keeps telling me to stop praying for humility because God seems hard of hearing. He keeps giving us humiliation. So, so it's look. You get what you need in some respects. I mean, I want to get into talking about the long, slow slog and the nature of that in a minute, but I do want to talk about the trite sayings that people offer. Now, almost everybody who talked to us during difficult times, and even now, absolutely means well, and it has a genuine heart for wanting to help. But there's a kind of a compulsion in humans that they have to say something, and they want to be seen to say something useful or wise or something. But in fact, I don't know. There's some circumstances where I thought there's nothing you can say that's going to be good. You know, it's not going to help, and maybe just shutting up and being there is a better idea.
It's really hard for people to do, though. I know that myself. I can't shut up
so much. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean,
equally though, Peter, it's hard for people to say something a lot of the time. I mean, I remember after we lost Teddy, he passed away, you know, sometime or somewhere between our home and the hospital, in the sense he was trying to be resuscitated. And I was at work when this all unfolded, so I kind of stayed at the hospital
waiting for
the ambulance. And so the entire hospital knew virtually about what had gone on. I'd worked there for some time. And I think the thing that really struck me in the months that followed that was how few of my colleagues said anything at all. A lot of the nurses and midwives I worked with were very, very good. They you know, the ones that I knew a little bit better, almost universally tried to at least say something to acknowledge my situation. My medical colleagues, however, I think of the probably 40 or 50 doctors I knew there, probably 2 or 3 actually said anything at all. 2 came to visit my house, for which I'm very grateful in the weeks that followed. But on going back to work a few weeks later, I think there might have been 2 or 3. And that was quite hard because I guess even if they'd said something that was not helpful, at least they would have been acknowledging that, you know, I was still in a bit of a challenging place. And you can't see that on the surface, you know, but they probably would have had some idea if they'd had any real empathy. And it would have really helped me at times for them to kind of say, "Oh, how are you going?" Kind of with that, just that knowing kind of look. Something as simple as that.
It's a good point. I mean, it's an interesting point you make, that sometimes it's better to have a go and stuff it up, provided you're prepared to be corrected or to take on board that maybe that wasn't the best thing to say.
Well, I think the trouble, Gabe's a very measured man. I am a tiger at times and erratic, and I think sometimes one day you could say to me something that I would find perfectly helpful, and the next day that same thing would be just horrible. Why would you say that? Why would you ask me if I knew about the condition before he was born? Or why would you say this? Or and so I've come to the conclusion that for me, and I tell this to people, that probably the best thing the 2 things you can safely say to me are, "How you going?" or "I'm here." And other than that, I'm sorry if I react or give you a dirty look. It's just my internal workings.
Yep, that's a fair call. And I think, though, most people I've encountered accept that I'm in those sort of circumstances, that I'm not in a good place, and that something that comes back from me is not to be taken personally. Most people have taken it that way. And the ones who don't isn't really about them trying to comfort you. They're just trying to sound good themselves. But the hard part has been the constant long slog afterwards. Like most people, after a difficult time in parenting, or after a difficult circumstance in particular, or when they first hear about a diagnosis or something that's ongoing, there's a lot of sympathy, There's a lot of people struggling to try and be helpful in some way. But, when you're into your second and third year and you're looking ahead, and particularly when you're wondering things like, how do I make this as normal as possible, and normal in inverted commas, whatever that means? Or what is reasonable to hope for? I mean, my son's making a lot of noise. He's starting to differentiate sounds, but there's no actual guarantee he ever says anything to us, like speaks out loud to us in words. What's reasonable to hope for? And these aren't questions which are necessarily asked consciously by most other parents. So that kind of feeling, like that it's hard to express and get, if you were looking for sympathy, where would you get it from? That kind of thing. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think when our youngest was born, someone said to me, it's really stuck with me. And at the time, it wasn't that helpful, but she said, it's okay to grieve. And I turned to her and I said, I don't know what I'm grieving for right now. He can't breastfeed. That's the big thing. But I've realized that along the way, there's lots of little griefs that you bear. And it might be realizing he'll never walk, or it could be he doesn't have any friends.
Right.
Lots of little griefs that take a toll, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I almost don't know what to say, really. There is definitely those moments, but I mean, there are, the thing that I look to day to day is really the example of people around me, and certainly Jovi obviously is the greatest example for me. She's doing most of the care and parenting, and so the fact that she kind of moves forward every day and makes those medical appointments and does that physio and leads the way is certainly my greatest inspiration. And so I guess those moments where I kind of have looked at certainly the youngest who's got a lot of things going on, I just put it in God's hands and hope for the best possible outcome, which to be honest is constantly surprising us. Certainly with Max, that's been the case. He we didn't know whether he would walk when he was kind of 9, 10, 12 months old.
Right.
We didn't know how functional he would be, but he is at school now, and he finds it hard to carry his school bag and do things like that, and he can't really play sport, but he gets into things. And
is it the case that when you look back, you can see how far you've come, whereas each day you're looking at what's the difficulty today, what's the struggle today, what's the hope we have today, perhaps?
Absolutely, yeah. And you might also say that we have perhaps the benefit of being exposed to this in other ways. I've got a brother with Down syndrome, so I kind of saw his development over a number of years and have some understanding of the beauty of the outcome when you make that early effort. Jovi, I think, has an even stronger innate understanding of how putting in a bit of effort day to day now, when your child has no expectation of you helping them, they just want to be fed and kept warm. But we really some days have to really push the kids. We do.
Yep.
It's a big effort to get Max to do physiotherapy. We put splints on Louis every night because he has lots of joint contractures, and he doesn't like it, and he wakes up a lot, which means we get up a lot. Mostly Joe gets up a lot. So those things are all really hard, and I mean they're just part of life now. And I could think to myself, well, if my child didn't have this, it wouldn't be a problem. But more than likely, they'd have other challenges. And certainly I don't know a single parent, even with normal children, whatever that means, that doesn't have a load of issues. And in some respects, the more normal a child is, the more intelligent and talented that they are, there's a kind of a whole nother level of challenges that comes with that. So
there are. Yeah, we've had. I just want to say, wind back a bit there. You may recall that we actually called you to and asked you to come and see us when Albert was first born, and your very ordinary reflection on what it was like to grow up with a brother with Down syndrome helped us a great deal in just mentally looking forward with Albert. I can't speak highly enough of that intervention. And what I wanted to go forward from there and say some of the hope that came from that was simply looking at the current situation and looking forward. What is possible for our child? What can we give with love? But I have to say that looking at Albert, that's our youngest boy, and just feeling that intense burning desire to have the best for him and hurt when he can't be the best that I want for him has made me realize I feel this of all my children. And it's just that when the lack is there, I feel it much more powerfully and strongly. And I realized it's actually awakened me to the love that I have for all the people around me, which normally just kind of ticks along in the background because I see them succeed and I see them flourish and I see them do their various things. But when they're not flourishing, in a sense, it makes me much more aware, and it awakens a kind of a power of the deep love of a parent in me and makes me go, whatever love I can possibly feel, however strong this is right now, it's still only a shadow of what God cares for Albert. And just the awe that inspires me is astounding. I shouldn't just rant about that. Sorry.
No, that's
I absolutely, and again, I didn't appreciate this with my brother Tom, but with my own children, the things we take for granted are really incredible, really are, and I thank God for things every day now that I never even considered in the past. The little wins, I last week had a fall off a motorized device on my way to work. Couldn't walk. It's and then I look, honestly, kind of pushing through that the last kind of week or two, the pain and things has, I think, been a lot easier knowing that I've got a son that has a lot of difficulty with walking. So it's one little example. But honestly, there are so many things that we take for granted that I appreciate so much more now.
Yes, and I have to say, having become somewhat of a quasi-expert in development and the steps that I am in awe of all the things that I have taken for granted with Zelly's growth and every other child that I see in my work when I'm working. Just the number of little steps that it takes for a child to transfer an object from one hand to another, like the little awarenesses along the way, and it's just phenomenal. So, one of our therapists will tell us, he needs to learn to put just to drop an object in something else, and so that's what we will do for weeks, and somehow that is such a basic step for all these other things to build on. I really am in awe, and I have learnt so much, and I will never take anything for granted when it comes to a child's development ever again.
It is. What about, let's get down to what actually helped. So you mentioned a couple of things in our conversation up until now about people's comments that may or not have really rang true at the time, but have come, if you like, they've come back and you've remembered them, like the comment you made about give yourself space to grieve, or it's okay to grieve. One of the things that I worried about is that grieving might be taken by someone as a kind of a regret that I had Albert in the first place. You know what I mean? Like that someone might say, are you wishing that you didn't have him, kind of thing. Whereas it's not that at all. It's a grief over the flourishing of my own child. But I was always a little bit hesitant in sharing my angst and my struggle with people because I didn't want to put them off the idea of caring for a child.
That's very true, I think. And it's hard to strike a balance, I think. Particularly I have found where we were when we lost Teddy was a place in Australia where we didn't really have any friends who were like-minded in terms of the faith. And so my instinct has been to just go out and forge friendships no matter what, because I need a community. I cannot cope without at least having people around who understand me, maybe 10%. That doesn't have to be 80%. But anyway, so I think I'm always quite conscious about how I speak about raising a child who doesn't fit the normal mold around those people. because there's a very different mindset in terms of the child as a gift. I mean, I don't know, actually, I think that is universal, that a child is a gift, but how much of the gift do we accept, or what kind of gifts will we accept, and is there a vetting process for the gift? Anyway, the analogy breaks down. But yes, I agree. I think it's hard to always speak completely candidly in every situation about the struggle. Yeah.
There's a certain amount of trust needed, isn't there, that the person you're talking to accepts that you believe your child is a gift from God, and that you only ever want the best, and your frustration is with the lack of flourishing and your success in helping them flourish rather than anything else. You need someone of that nature to talk to be able to support you and continue to reaffirm the nature of the gift. But what you don't want is cliches. You don't want someone to trot out the normal kind of, well, God works all good things, things for good. Well, you know what? Some of the things suck, and they can't be called good. They're just, no, you may not say that's okay. That sucks. That's not good. It's not a happy thing. Some things may happen in God's permissive will, but God didn't do this to my child. This is not something that happens to someone. The question is what good can be brought out of this bad?
Yeah, I sometimes reflect on this from a professional perspective, in that I deal with couples that have been given a bad diagnosis or prognosis for a child they're carrying, and that obviously has, let's say, a personal element to it for me. So it's actually quite hard for me sometimes to find the balance between saying things that I think will be helpful, realizing that a lot of other doctors will be saying things that probably don't give them much hope, but also trying to be realistic about the challenges they're facing and not knowing often what their view on life is. And so a lot of times those conversations, when I'm kind of on the other side of the situation, are trying to find out what their mindset is. How much are they prepared to accept in their life? Were their expectations of having a child all kind of bells and whistles, and we've got all these great plans, and which obviously a mature person hopefully has grown well beyond that before they even come to the decision of having children, knowing that, I often quote this to couples that are in a difficult situation. I say, look, 5% of kids that are born either at birth or within a few months will have a significant medical issue. And if you look across the Australian population, including adults, a massive proportion of us have a disability. But we never see these things. They're largely hidden, buried by various cultural, interpersonal factors. And even as a doctor, often you're not cognizant of the reality of suffering out there in society. So when you then enter into this situation as a couple or as an individual, it's a learning that no one can prepare you for.
Right.
And so it's understandable that people don't know what to say, and certainly even health professionals in this situation can be amazingly unhelpful. And I know you've got lots of experiences with that, Peter.
I have to say that when one of the things that happened, and it's happened to us several times now in different specialists that we've come across, is that they handed us a list of what seemed to us to be a list of what's going to happen with your child. So here's the list of things that are going to happen with Albert now that he's been born with these congenital heart defect and Down syndrome and other complications. Now, he happened to have been born in the school community we were in at the time. There were about 4 babies born the same year who had Down syndrome, and all of us got the same lists. But out of all of the children, Albert had, I think, about 4 times as many complications as the other people in that particular small group. And he still only had less than, I think, 1/20th of the things on the list they gave us. So it just wasn't a realistic view. I think there was a bit of butt covering there in terms of just giving us all the potential things up front so that we we were informed, sort of thing. But to be honest, it was mostly scary because we just got this list of all these horrible things. What they didn't tell us and they can't tell you, is the feeling when you hear the first involuntary chuckle come out of your baby, or when you have that first sort of moment of joy when they make some tiny milestone that you would never have normally noticed. Those kinds of things. They can't bottle that. They can't put it on a piece of paper, and they can't tell you the kind of love that is awoken in you by that. And so I'm not convinced a medical person is the only consultant that should be there in those circumstances.
No, I agree, but I've actually had a very, very good experience recently. I'll just say there's three things, talking about things that are helpful to hear. And one, absolutely, I know you know this, Peter, but dead set, the best thing I could ever hear is we're praying for you. Like, that's
fantastic.
Isn't it just, you just feel so buoyed up by knowing that someone really is keeping you.
If you know they mean it.
Yeah, those other people who just fake praise.
Well, no, not so much that, but in the sense that they also, if they were in a capacity to help, that they would in a practical way.
Right. Yes.
That's number one. But I just want to move on to the two medical examples I have. And actually, one is not really particularly medical, but a very old friend of mine from medical school. We walk very, very different. We come from very different walks of life. We catch up about 2 or 3 times a year on the phone. And I spoke to her for the first time after Louis was born, when he was about 2 months old. And she said, so I just started explaining all the things medically that were wrong with him. And she said, stop. Can you just tell me the good things about him? Can you start with the good things? And I said, well, he does a really good one-eyed eyebrow raise. Yeah, he does. He's really good at that. And we just started talking about silly things like that. And it was the best thing ever, just the way that she had asked that. And I was really grateful to her. And then the other thing I want to say, and I tell this to a lot of my medical friends now, a couple of months ago we were meeting, because we've moved to a new city, we were meeting yet another pediatrician for Louis. And I was explaining to her, because she could wade through all the papers and the referrals and things, but I was just explaining to her genetically, that he's what they call a compound heterozygote. So he's got one bad gene from Gabe and one bad gene from me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, talk about not meant to be together, right? And she said, or really meant to be together. And I'm so not used to anything like that in the medical world. It's all about, things should be prevented, genetic problems we know about them in order to prevent them from ever coming to the light. But she was just so affirming, and she kind of just in one little comment validated my children's existence, and I just thought she was the best.
And that's kind of a cultural point that I guess we haven't spoken about, but we've got to do massive things to change our culture. And I know there's so many people out there that want to, and there are some amazing examples. But I heard recently that in the UK there's a mother of a child with Downs and a woman with Down syndrome that want to take the government to court, basically, for discrimination at various levels. Yeah. And there's been talk of a similar case in New Zealand. And Downs is one small example, I guess, a very personal one for some of us. But the culture, as much as we believe we're all for diversity, there's no question that true acceptance of all people is something that is really beyond what our culture currently is able to take. I mean, it requires a love of others that is really rare. And I guess
that's a good point there, Gabe. And especially I want to pick up on that, because really what this whole thing has revealed to me is that our culture has forgotten that having a child is an act of self-sacrificing love in the first place. That it's not just an accessory to my very successful life when I've got my marriage, my home, my boat, my whatever else, that I now add a kid to this set, if you like. This changes your whole life. I mean, children, a lot of comedians and a lot of commentators are making these comments about not having too many children because it upsets their lifestyle. And you go, well, yeah, absolutely it does. It totally revolutionizes you as a human being, which brings me to my next point. How has being a parent changed you as a person? What sort of person has this experience made you? How has it changed you?
Ooh. I actually, when we talked about doing this podcast, I guess my first thought was, I don't feel qualified to say anything about really being a parent in the sense of this is what you can learn from me. But in terms of how it's changed me, look, I guess the most important thing I can say is I'm a lot happier now as a parent than I was before I was a parent, despite the challenges. The kids.
So if you added up these circumstances, they wouldn't be in your recipe for happiness, would they?
If you'd said to me 10 years ago, look, you're going to have 2 kids with a disability and you'll lose another one, there's no way I could have comprehended that. And I guess that's the nature of life and what God allows in our lives and how we have to learn to grow through various situations. But
it seems strange, Gabe, to use the word happiness in that context.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But it's true. It's absolutely true. And
so what do you mean by happiness then? I mean, they're not circumstances which you'd go, oh, whoopee. You know, how was happiness brought about by that?
I mean, I guess I can say that there comes with difficulties in life a situation or a moment when you have to either accept it for what it is and focus on the positives in the situation, or you carry on thinking, woe is me, and inevitably that's not a recipe for happiness. And
no.
When you do choose the path of acceptance and I guess you grieve any losses or thoughts you might have had about what your life was going to be like, you then kind of free yourself of I guess a lot of unrealistic thoughts that we all have about what it means to be happy or what it means to be human or what it means to live in this day and age. Accepting that my oldest was never going to enjoy some of the sports I did, or I'd never be able to, potentially take him surfing or do the things that I like. You accept that and I move on to something else like, well, these are all the great things I could do with him. And that's a day-to-day decision, obviously, that that I make, and certainly I see Jovi making all the time, making lots of sacrifices. But when you make them and you see, I guess, how really we're still a happy family and still together, in some ways it's much more powerful and much more. There's, I guess, a lot more happiness seeing that than perhaps, I guess, if we were all normal in inverted commas. In some ways, it's a difficult thing to explain, but it gives me a lot of joy a lot of days, amidst the challenging moments.
Yeah, I'd have to say the happiest. Never thought I'd say anything like this, as so saccharine as this, but happiest part of my day is if I go and walk. I push the double pram with the 2 little ones to go and pick up Max, and it's mostly downhill on the way back. So I sometimes take a scooter, and he can just coast down a little bit of an incline on the scooter. If he's trying to go up, then there's just no hope. But it's the only time in his life when he's been able to get away from me. Like, he's never been able to run away from me or be, but he loves it. It's just, and I love seeing the joy on his face when he realizes he can get away from mum. I has to run after him, and it's awesome. And yeah, I know it sounds so trite.
No.
But that is my happiness. And in terms of how has this changed me, I am not what anyone ever would have described as a patient person before. I'm not saying I am a patient person now, but I'm closer to it. There are so many little things that have grown me and stretched me and carved away at me. But I think certainly my kids have grown my heart every step of the way. And I know that's true for every parent, and it's such a joy, and it's such an unexpected joy how you can feel. I think parental love is obviously unconditional. But it's not to say it's not painful as well.
No. In fact, the pain reveals how intense it is, really.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for that. And I think I understand so much more of the Father's love now, and really trying to image that for my children.
In some respects, my children have dragged me kicking and screaming into some semblance of love. I'm actually, I have to acknowledge, I thought I was a good person until I had children, and then I realized that I'm actually quite a selfish person, and that I'd much rather lie in on a Saturday morning and just, snooze out the most of the morning and then get up for some coffee. But my kids come and bounce on my bed and remind me it's time to love. And it's not convenient, and it's not easy, and it's not and their cuteness is a kind of a weapon that God uses to drag us kicking and screaming into some sort of semblance of His love, His joy in us, and it's only in that I've understood the kind of God doesn't feel pain in the way we do, but the kind of angst and genuine, complete love that God has for us as we bumble around messing things up and not getting to where He'd like us to be, and all those kinds of things. Wow. Okay. That's probably enough for this particular podcast. If today's discussion got you thinking, arguing with your podcast device, let us know. You can subscribe to the podcast at thiscatholiclife.com.au. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what or who you would like us to discuss in the future by dropping us a line at info@thiscatholiclife.com.au, or you can join us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Discord, or any of the usual social medias. Write us a review and recommend us to your friends. Remember that this is a uniquely Australian Catholic podcast. We think that's an idea worth getting behind, so tell your friends. Before we go, we normally do a shout out. So do you have a shout out to someone?
You think I'd be ready?
Especially given you're almost a devotee of this podcast.
I know, I knew this was coming, and I don't have a shout out. Okay, I just have to shout out to all the family and friends that have supported us over the years. You know who you are. You check in on us. Some of you come up and visit us for lengths at a time, just at the right time. We're just so grateful, and I don't know how we would have survived without all of your love and love.
I guess my shout out has to go to parents to be or new parents who we know lots of. We're very happy to be in a community of people that are accepting of the beauty of children, and it's wonderful to see that unfolding in other people. I almost have a point of not offering advice because I guess part of me wants just to see how things go with them, and I am always just amazed by the beautiful things that unfold in families, and so I can think of a few specific names. I won't embarrass them, but shout out to them.
Excellent. I'm going to throw my shout out for this episode to those people who have been generous in their time and in their experience. So I've always noticed that people with more children, more people in their house could stretch the walls further than those with less in their house. But it's also true of people who've suffered the most also seem to be able to, their hearts have been stretched, and they seem to be able to stretch even further to help those who are in similar need. I want to say thank you to those people who had shared their experiences with me and Susie along the way, and that made such a difference to us at the crucial times. So shout out to you. That's all for now. Thank you for listening to This Catholic Life.